Okay, we are beginning Beowulf, but before we can actually begin Beowulf, I need to give you an introduction to the Anglo Saxon and early Middle Ages. So, the Middle Ages, the time period for the early Middle Ages is 449 to 1066. So, according to tradition, the first people who came to the region were Germanic invaders known as Jutes from the Jutland Peninsula of Denmark. Then came the Angles and Saxons, and these Germanic tribes brought with them a common language known as Old English or Anglo Saxon. Now, Anglo Saxon England was broken into different kingdoms. You had Essex, Wessex, Kent, Northumbria, East Anglia, and Sussex. They organized themselves in an effort to keep out the Vikings. Now, if you look at the map, a lot of these little kingdoms actually were pretty well organized. And in modern England, these kingdoms are actually now, for the most part, with the exception of Mercia in there, they're actually modern day counties within England. For the civilization and hierarchy of the family and society, it was actually pretty well developed from the family unit out to the clan, to the tribe, then to the kingdom. And so, as you can see in the nice little flow chart, you have the family unit, then the clan, then the kingdom. So, and the only thing that I missed in there was the tribe, but it's pretty self-explanatory, and pretty well organized. And the Anglo-Saxons were actually they like to hold meetings and people so that people could openly express what they thought and felt. And this is a pretty it's a bit democratic, and it's a pretty much democratic state of mind or habit of mind, and it's actually a precursor of today's democratic process. And that being said, that means that there's a misnomer about the Anglo-Saxons, was that they were actually a warring people. This is not true. They had to defend themselves, and therefore that's why they were fighting so often. They were defending themselves from the Vikings and from other kingdoms. So not only were they democratic, the Anglo-Saxons were also pretty artistic, and they produced pieces such as ornamental bracelets, brooches, pins, that were pretty exquisite designs and workmanship. They were also artists, poets, and they had men of great learning. So by the end of the Anglo-Saxon period, European rulers were to send to England for teachers. So the Anglo-Saxons were pretty well advanced and pretty well developed. Now, one aspect of Anglo-Saxon civilization that survives into modern society are the names of certain weekdays, and they're derived from the names of old Anglo-Saxon gods, otherwise known as Aas. So, for example, Tuesday comes from Tu, god of war. Wednesday, Woden, the chief Teutonic god. Thursday, Thor, god of thunder, hence Thor, as you've seen recently in some of the movies. And Friday, Frigga, goddess of the home. And many basic American traditions that we carry on today in, say, law, conduct, outlook, language, and literature are actually a legacy from the Anglo-Saxons. Now this brings us into heroism, heroes, and role models. So the shortness of life or lifespan caused people to admire men of outstanding courage and heroism regardless of their tribe. And this shortness of life and lifespan was from the fact that you didn't have that modern medicine, so you had disease running rampant, and also that idea that you had people fighting and warring. So now, because of that, you had a lot of loyalty to leader, loyalty to the tribe, and a fierce personal valor, and it was necessary for the survival of all. People of rank were treated with courtesy, the utmost respect, and this was actually important because the ruler was then to turn around. He treated those who were loyal with generosity, and the followers then remained loyal. There was some give and take there. So you treated your leader with loyalty. He then rewarded you. And heroic human will and courage allowed individuals to control their own response to fate and win fame and become models for others. There was a lot of belief in fate. back during this time period. So basically people, went into, say for example, battle, believing that, if I don't come out of this, well then it was fated to happen, I was fated to die. Which is going to now start connecting us into some of that literature. So poetry, for example, it was an oral tradition. Poems were frequently sung or accompanied by a harp. Poetry was not written down until a much later period. Much of the population was illiterate, therefore this is why a lot of this literature was orally kept. And then we have our scop. Our scop was a professional poet and the memory and historian of the tribe. Please remember this term, very important. The scop needed to remember the history, kings, battles, and folklore of the tribe. The oral nature necessitated that the scop know alliteration and could drum a strong beat. Now, not only did scop need to know, and not only was his only job to know the history, the battles, the kings, etc., but they also recited well-known poems, and they occasionally actually created new poems. So they had a lot going on there. Now, the two most important functions of poetry were heroic tradition and elegiac tradition, otherwise known as mourning the passing of earlier or better times. Now, eventually, Christian traditions replaced pagan traditions of the tribe. The Anglo Saxons, they began as a pagan, with pagan traditions, pagan beliefs, but eventually Christian traditions and Christian beliefs overtook those pagan beliefs. Now, the few poems that were written during this time period were written in Latin by churchmen, and as I said before, most of the public during this time were illiterate and could not read or write. The church clergy were few of the people during this time period who were literate. Now, very important, one of the first people to use written English as opposed to Latin during this time was King Alfred the Great, who used English to write the Anglo Saxon Chronicle, which was the first written record to be kept in English. Please remember that. The Anglo Saxon Chronicle, very important. This record showed that Alfred kept diplomatic ties with neighboring kingdoms. He sent embassies to Rome. He corresponded with the Patriarch of Jerusalem. He formulated a code of law, and he founded the first public schools. Hence, King Alfred the Great. So you need to remember the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and what it demonstrated, what it did, and what it kept. Now we're moving into the history behind Beowulf. So this poem, it's an epic poem, and it's the most important single poem of this time period. It is England's heroic epic. It's the only surviving manuscript, or the only surviving manuscript of Beowulf, dates from around 1000, but the work itself was probably composed sometime during the 8th century, and don't forget that it came down through oral tradition. And Beowulf recounts the exploits of 3rd or 4th century Geats and Danes, I promise you it's pronounced Geats, which is based on earlier unwritten stories that had been passed from generation to generation by word of mouth, most likely through the Scots. Now, the Anglo-Saxons of Britain shared a common group of heroes with other Germanic peoples, and Beowulf has his origins in an earlier pagan era. Now, the author of the written version seems to have been a Christian. The language of this version is Old English. So Beowulf, like all epic poems, is about a hero who becomes leader of his people. All epics, you have a hero, and Beowulf is our hero in this tale. Now, this hero is larger than life, known as the epic hero, and we will get into that in a moment. The general tone of this poem is somber, owing to a vision of evil in the world, a belief in the power of fate. The word weird is the English word for fate. Please remember that. And this belief in the power of fate to rule human destiny and resignation to a certainty of death. So now, the opening of the poem tells about the ancestors of the Danish king Hrothgar. So Hrothgar wins great fame and wealth in battles. So he builds a mead hall called Heorot to commemorate his victories. The mead hall is so called because of a popular drink mead, a fermented liquor, which is drunk at banquets and celebrations. Now, Herat is also intended to be a place of peace and community. It is a symbol of the loyalty and interdependence of the Lord and his faithful warriors. Remember, going back to what we discussed at the beginning, which was that idea that you are faithful to your ruler will then reward you. And in this case, Hrothgar rewarded his followers and with this mead hall. Now, however, fate has the monster Grendel in store for the Danes, rather, and that's where we'll leave this story, and we'll pick it up in class. Now we have Beowulf, our epic hero. Throughout the epic poem, the protagonist Beowulf is considered an epic hero, and this is for the more than his larger-than-life stature. He is our hero. He's going to come in, and he will try to save Hrothgar, save Herat, save the kingdom. Now, this is also important, an epic hero, what he does, or what he is. An epic hero is one, he's significant and glorified. He is on a quest. Beowulf, believe me, he's on a quest. He's on a quest to kill Grendel and such. He has superior or superhuman strength, intelligence, and or courage. Remember, and please remember this. Beowulf is human. Even though he's human, he has superhuman strength, intelligence, or courage, and or courage. So his strength, intelligence, etc. is all above that. It can be like superhero-like, even though he is a human. He is ethical. He risks death for glory or for the greater good of society. And in this case, with Beowulf, he's risking death for society. He is a strong and responsible leader. He performs brave deeds. And lastly, he reflects the ideals of a particular society. And when I say that he reflects the ideals of a particular society, please remember everything that we talked about with society, with the community, because that's all going to come back and it all connects. Now, that being said, I'm going to leave that there. You have now had an introduction to Beowulf, to the early Middle Ages, and to Anglo Saxon society. And you will now need to email to me to demonstrate that you have seen this. One, what is give me two qualities of an epic hero, and two pieces of information that you have learned about Middle Ages society. Again, two qualities of an epic hero and two pieces of information about Middle Age society.